Hello, everybody. It is Monday, January 6th. My name is Justin Ayers, and you're listening to Bell Lot Podcast, where we talk about all things Grand Slam track. And what a week it has been for Grand Slam track. There is so much to talk about, but this is episode number 5. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button if you're listening on YouTube, and if you are on Spotify, hit follow. Also, give us a 5-star rating and review. It helps us a lot. We are now also on Apple Podcasts, so we got the podcast on Apple. So if you listen to that, you can find us there by searching the Bell Lot Podcast. And we'll just hop right into it. And so, as a track and cross country and general distance running fan, you know that your sports kind of fall into that second tier of sports, probably along with like golf and tennis and different things like that. And so when I get a notification on my ESPN app about track, I'm like, this is crazy. And I think a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about. Fred Kerley, arrested in Miami County. What a situation that is. If you haven't heard, just to recap pretty much a very, very brief summary on what happened. Police had blocked off an area for investigation. This is right around the time of the New Orleans bombing that just happened, that attack on the city. And so police were being very vigilant with searching, and they had noticed a suspicious vehicle parked near where emergency personnel was supposed to be parked. And so they had blocked off a decent-sized area to investigate. And so I'm summarizing all this from the New York Times, but essentially somebody was already becoming an aggressor to these police officers who are stationed out in front of this area when Kerley walks up, and essentially the conflict between them just escalates, and he ends up being wrestled to the ground, hit, and ends up stunned with a taser. It's crazy too because there is body cam video out there right now, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it all, but really does look like he's just kind of standing there when he gets stunned. And so it's super interested to see how this ends up turning out. But I really was thinking about how, like, for Grand Slam track, this is kind of one of the first, like, scandals, I guess, to happen to one of their athletes. And I'll be interested to see if Johnson, how he takes it. It makes me wonder if this is more going to show if these athletes are more like a la carte, or is it going to show that there's more of a team situation here going on? Because this is actually not Kerley's first run-in with the law that's currently on his record. He's got 2 felony charges for robbery and domestic violence from his former wife. But it makes you wonder, like, if he ends up getting convicted of these felonies and has to put that on his record, like, does the league discipline him? There's only 4 meets, and he is one of the bigger names, so I think Grand Slam track could probably still use him out there if he goes and is able to countersue, like he said he planned on doing in an interview. If he plans on countersuing against the police, and if that pulls off, oh my gosh, does that raise his profile? It's just so crazy that this just Olympic bronze medalist from this past Olympics is already in a situation like this. And so it's going to be really interesting to watch it unfold, especially, like I said, the body cam footage is out there. And I think a lot of people have their opinions on it and feel like he was a victim of unnecessary force. And what sucks for Kerley is it really is probably going to give his brand and image a bad name for a little bit, because he's this really just confident guy who's very sure of himself. Sometimes I think to some people it can come across a little arrogant, and a lot of them are going to take this and they're going to put 2 and 2 together and make him into a villain, when I don't know if he's a villain. He is asserting that this all is and other people in his camp, so it's not just his voice, but other people are saying that, like, the felony charges last year were spurred on from just an egregious claim. So going to be interesting, I think, to watch Kerley going forward. Since this was front and center, I decided to go ahead and cover men's sprints, and so that's what we're going to be covering, the 4 sprinters that signed to Grand Slam track in the later part of the show. But on a more positive note, there was a big update from Grand Slam track commissioner Michael Johnson. He put out this post on Instagram for the new year, thanking everybody who has been so supportive of him, but also he mentioned a few pretty key details. The big question for Grand Slam track has been what's going to happen with the TV deal. And according to what he posted, they've got it. They've got it figured out. And it's going to be coming out in January. He's going to say who's broadcasting this in January, which makes sense. I mean, if you start to think that we're less than 100 days from Kingston in April, people are going to need to know how they're going to watch this. And so apparently that's going to be coming out. He did make a comment that he was like, I know that some people were very hesitant to sign because of not having a TV deal. And he's pretty much just like commenting right at Noah Lyles. But he essentially is saying that like he wanted his team set in the new year. And he did not plan on announcing anything about the TV deal until January. And so the timing just did not work for some people. I don't know if that's just him trying to save face as the commissioner of the new league, or if that's how he is really taking this situation and moving forward with it strategically. But I'd be interested to see if I had to put my chips on a provider. My chips right now would be on Netflix. I just think they're starting to get into a lot of this live streaming sports things. And then they've also have the Sprint TV show, and it just seems like a good mix. Another way to ease them into 4 more live events that should be able to get at least a decent amount of numbers. Seems like, in my opinion, they need to continue to work through some of the live programming too, and they already have experience at track and field meets, so I think they'd be able to put on a good show. But I could also see this being something that like Peacock picks up. They seem to pick up a lot of different like French sports. So it'll be interesting to see what that comes out. And so that's news that I'll definitely be waiting to hear over the next week. But there's been a lot going down with Johnson as it pertains to field events. Back when he launched Grand Slam track, he made the comment where he's like, I think I can fix track. Because someone was like, why aren't you putting in field events? And he pretty much through saying that was like, I don't know if I'm the person to fix field events. Well, Tara Davis Woodhall, the golden medalist in the women's long jump, goes on Noah Lyles and Grant Holloway's podcast Beyond the Records and kind of slams Johnson for this decision, saying that like field events, I'm really summarizing this, but basically like field events are awesome and that a lot of people do pay attention to field events, and I actually think that there's a lot of merit to what she said, because if you look, her long jump was a huge deal, and one of the biggest male stars right now in track and field is Ryan Krauser, and he might be one of the greatest throwers of all time, and I think that signing him to throw on national television probably would have drawn in a ton of viewers, because I watched him throw in the Olympics, and I mean, it is just fantastic. And there are a number of pole vaulting stars and jumping stars. I also, though, think that I do want to give Johnson some credit that, especially for high jump, in my personal opinion, I think it's so hard to turn that into a live TV product. I think that you could do it with the throws and long jump, because you could give each person their jumps. You could probably do it during one of the distance event and split screen it, and it would be able to showcase those events really well and make it dramatic and have people commentating both, especially like during a 5K, especially if you have 2 5Ks. If you got a men's and a women's 5Ks, that's going to be 25 minutes right there, and I think you could fit in a long jump event and a shot and discus throw in there, at least for a few field events. But Johnson did come out in this post that I was referring to, and he's like, look, I will support anybody who wants to do what I'm doing for field events. And he's also like, I've got research that I'm more than willing to help you get started with. I think what he's saying is that when he said, I can save track and field. He's more trying to say, me, Michael Johnson, the golden medalist in track and field, can save track and field. Maybe he wasn't trying to throw shade at field events. He was more talking about himself and his own abilities, and I think that's at least what he's trying to kind of tilt the focus towards a little bit. But he did talk about challengers, and this was, I think, something that he's been getting a lot of because the absence of some of the big stars like Benjamin and Holloway and Lyles and Richardson has been a lot of the talk that I think some of the haters of Grand Slam track are using to kind of talk down upon the league. And they keep saying that this thing's going to fail, this thing's going to fail, this thing's going to fail. And I think he's well aware that that's part of the biggest reasons that you've got some big American stars who aren't in this thing. And he came out and he basically was like, look, I know they're not here. I like the team I have. And some of those people who aren't here, I really think they're going to be here. And he threw out the numbers. Some of them are going to be here for 1, 2, and he even said some might do 3. They just didn't want to commit to all 4. I'm going to be really interested and surprised, I think, if we see somebody who does 3 and who wasn't actually named as a racer. But, I mean, you never know. I did read an article, I don't remember where it's from, so I'm sorry I'm not going to cite the source, but I was reading this article and they were listing all the different schedule problems with Grand Slam track. Like the Kingston meet is at the same time as another big meet, and this apparently has caused a lot of athletes to not join Grand Slam track, and so I'll be interested to see now as these challengers line up. There seems to be a lot of momentum going towards, we may not get all the stars all the time, but we're going to get some. And that'll be cool, I think, from a marketing standpoint, too, where, yes, you've got your consistents. You've got Kerley and Bednarek, who are always going to be going head-to-head, but now there could be special ads or special commercials for that one race that, like, Kishane Thompson decides to show up, or that one race where Lyles maybe decides to walk in, or Richardson or something, and then all of a sudden you've got marketing material and a reason for people to tune in. Because if Noah Lyles is only going to be in one Grand Slam track meet, which I have skepticism about his participation, I really do, and I'll talk about that a little later, but if he's going to do one, that's going to be the one people watch, and they're going to make sure that they push it out there. So I liked what Johnson had to say. I'm feeling pretty good about this first season. I did watch an interview this morning of Kerley, and he kind of said, someone asked him about Grand Slam track, and I think this is before he announced he had signed. It was Chavez from Citius Mag, and he's basically like, what do you think about Grand Slam track? And he said, look, I'm not doing this thing if it's going to fail. And so now fast forward and he joins this thing. So, I mean, there's a lot of professional confidence in this. And, I mean, you got to look. We've got 48 of the fastest runners in the world who have signed to do this thing for a full season. And it's easy to remember who's not there. But sometimes you also got to flip and be like, there are some event groups where you've got the top 4 or 3 of the top 4 who are going to be competing. So let's go ahead and hop into the main part of the show, and we're going to go ahead and break down the different sprinters who are going to be competing each week. And so we'll go back to Kerley and kind of give you a little bit of synopsis on him as we move forward. So Fred Kerley, American, age 29. He's our 2024 Olympic bronze medalist in the 100, 2020 Olympic silver in the 100. He has medaled at the World Championships, got gold in 2019 in the 4x4, 2022 he got gold in the 100, and then he also got gold in 2023 in the 4x1. He's got Diamond League golds in 2018 and 2021, and he's actually one of only 3 people ever to be sub 10 in the 1, sub 20 in the 200, and sub 44 in the 400. And so getting into his PRs in this Grand Slam events, he ran a 9.76 in the 1 and a 19.76 in the 2. And then just for you all, he ran a 43.64 in the 400. So really, he could be one of those kind of like Thomas, Gary Thomas we talked about last week, who signed up to do short sprints right now who could do long sprints later in the Grand Slam season. But background on Kerley, so grew up in Taylor, Texas, attended Taylor High School, and he actually got his start on a youth sprint team. He began competing at South Plains College collegiately, very successful, like we hear with many of these stories, transfers to Texas A&M. During the fall of his senior year, he tried to compete at the Olympic trials, but he did not advance. But what he did do was secure a spot on the NACAC U23 championships, and he goes to this event and earns gold in the 4x1. So this kind of helps him keep getting his name up. Then he goes back to school, wins NCAA titles in the indoor 400 and the 4x4. Then outdoor season, he wins the 400 and sets the NCAA record in the 400 also, and then wins the 4x4. So has a very successful collegiate career. Goes to Nike in 2027, wins USATF championships, and makes it to his first world championship. He does Diamond League in 2018. Then he suffers an injury, and so he's forced to go through the comeback process. He turns his focus to the Tokyo Olympics, but he's still not like 100%, and then he's got like some ankle issues, and he's got to drop the 4, which has been one of his main events, and try to get through the 1 and the 2 because he can at least try and fight through that. So ends up making the 100 team and makes it to his first Olympic Games. He ends up winning his first individual title in 2022 in the 100 meters. And so he's kind of at this point made his full transition from the 400 and made his way down to the 100. And then that's where he goes to the Olympics this year. And it's pretty well documented on Sprint, the show, and it kind of talks you through him and Bednarek and their showdowns in those finals between them and Lyles. And the interesting thing about Kerley is he, like I said earlier, is so confident and has so much belief in himself. Like, he genuinely believes that he is not only the fastest man in the world, but that he is the fastest man of all time, or that he at least believes he's going to get there. I actually think that a lot of his confidence is really awesome and refreshing, because he says it, and then he also says, though, that like it's on him to back up what he's saying, and he bets on himself consistently and always tries to put his money where his mouth is, rather than just talk a bunch of stuff and then end up doing nothing. And so he ends up getting bronze. I think it was bronze. Let me check that. Yeah, he gets bronze at the Olympics this year, and he's devastated. He is so disappointed that he doesn't win. And again, that final, and I've said it in almost every podcast I bring up just how close that final was. Could have gone any way. And he even talked to Sirius Mag in that interview about how he's done leaning, and that could have been it. A little more of a lean could have helped pole vault him a little further into the Shane Thompson, Noah Lyles area. But he's super disappointed just after that race, and you have to wonder if that's part of what made him decide to do Grand Slam track. The whole him versus Bednarek is going to be a great narrative for the league going forward, especially if, again, one of these top dogs who aren't there show up. I mean, these races are going to be entertaining and fun to watch. And so the big question, though, with Kerley is, with all of this going on in the background, like, is that going to affect any of this? Like, is he going to be distracted? I mean, is he going to get suspended? I just don't really see this ending up in a suspension. I don't think that's how Grand Slam track is going to operate, since it's, yes, they're on like a team of, or on a roster, but they're kind of still each their individual racers. I just don't see this being something that Johnson ends up really making a discipline for, because he wants Kerley out there, and I think that the people want Kerley out there. And so there's still, though, with sprinting being such a technical and mental sport, having all this stuff going on in the background and being a distraction, like, how's that going to affect him? And so Moving on to the other half of that rivalry, I think that we're going to see develop, and the rivalry that they really seem to be pushing with Grand Slam track is Kenny Bednarek. So he's a 26-year-old American, back-to-back Olympic silver medalist in the 200-meter dash in 2020 and 2024. He's also got the World Championship silver, same event. He's got 2 Diamond League wins in 2021 and 2024, and then was also a part of a 4x1 gold relay in 2024 at the World Relays. And so Bednarek's Grand Slam event PRs, he's got a 9.87 100 meter and then a 19.57 200 meter. He is definitely the standout in the 200 of this group. And I mean, when he wins that silver medal, like legit, he is probably the second best in the world, or on a different day, he could be the best in the world. Like, I think he's very capable of winning a gold medal, but he's known as Kung Fu Kenny. He's got this Rambo head tie that he wears, and it kind of is just like his brand. And so he was born in Oklahoma, grew up with a single mom in Wisconsin. It was him and a brother. He was just an excellent athlete both on the track and on the football field. He actually won state championships in both his senior year, but by the time he was all said and done in high school, he had won 7 state titles in track and field. In 2018, his 200 time was actually the fastest time in all of the United States for high schoolers. The big story, and a lot of people know this about Kenny Bednarek, is that he was this absolute phenomenal athlete. Obviously, he ended up on an Olympic track path, but he also probably was on his way to the NFL. But the thing was, his grades were so bad that none of these powerhouse D1 colleges would take him. And so he ends up going JUCO. And so he goes to Indian Hills Community College in Iowa. In an interview, he was talking about how I think it was with the running effect. He's like, I thought I was going to be one of those people who went JUCO and transferred out after a year, but no, he ends up staying and does his 2 years at JUCO, and he wins national junior college titles in the 2 and the 4, and he uses that as his pathway. So he's not a super traditional athlete in the sense of, like, you think about these athletes who go D1 straight out of college or high school where they're winning everything, and then they go straight from their D1 national championships into pros. No, he was JUCO all the way, and then he goes and he signs with Nike straight out of junior college. He ends up training with Justin Gatlin, and he had primarily been one of more of a 2 and a 400, and he kind of turns more of his focus to the 200. And so he actually hurts his hamstring in 2019 while he's making the transition to pro running, and he doesn't run well when he's able to make the world championship team. He has to make a comeback, and he ends up going to the trials, making the team, and runs it all the way to earning silver in Tokyo, which is, he's kind of was one of those people that I think everyone was like, we know he's fast, we know he can do it, he just hasn't done it yet, and he was able to peak at the right time. And so he brings this back in 2023. He gets top 5 in the 200 at the World Championships, which is a disappointing finish to him at that point, but I also think that he knew kind of where he comes from. He's kind of a foil to Kerley. I mean, whereas Kerley is a lot more rigid and I'm the best and I know it, Bednarek is a lot more chill and laid back, go with the flow, and is a lot more humble in a lot of the words that he chooses and how he describes himself. And so he was described himself after that as, he's just like, I'm grateful that I'm even in the top 5. And so after the success in the 200, he makes his first 100 team in this most recent Olympics, and he goes and he's in that final and he finishes 7th. But then after that, he's able to come back in. I think he stunned kind of the world when he beats Lyles coming down the final stretch to earn his 2nd silver medal. And so Kenny Bednarek is insanely talented, and he might be the best in this group. I mean, this rivalry, this is probably, in my opinion, the most real rivalry right now outside of maybe the men's hurdles and maybe the men's 15 that we have in place, that I think is going to be really fun to watch, because these two athletes are so similar. They are at a super high level, and yet they are so just kind of different. I mean, like, I think a cool quote from Kerley that I heard was, I think I wrote it down here. I hate everybody when it comes to competition. He's basically like, as soon as they step on the track, I'm out for blood. And then you've got Kerley, or you got Bednarek, and he's more like, I'm just happy to be here. Like, I know I'm great, and I know that I'm capable of being at a high level. But there's just a lot more of like a chill, laid back approach. So that's going to be cool, but they are just 2 of the 4, and just 2 of the 8 that'll be on the track. So we'll move on to the others too. Big name out of Great Britain, Zharnel Hughes, 29-year-old. He's Olympic bronze medalist in the 4x1, bronze medalist at World Championships in the 100 meter in 2023. And then he's got silvers at the 2019 and bronze at 2020 World Championships in the 4x1. He's also a 4-time European champion in sprints. So time-wise, he is a 9.83 in the 100, and he is a 19.73 in the 200-meter dash. I'm going to butcher this. So he's born and raised in Anguilla, which is an island that is part of the UK. And it's a small island, so he begins winning races at a very young age. He's 10 years old when he's kind of starting to already make a name for himself. By age 14, he makes his international debut at the CARIFTA, which is Caribbean Free Trade Association Games in 2010. Then he makes the Youth Commonwealth Games in 2011, where he goes sub-11 and really kind of gets eyes on him. This helps propel him to his first World Championship competition when he goes to the World Youth Meet in 2012, and he sets the country's national record. Ends up going to Kingston College in Jamaica, which is such a cool parallel, because him, and I'm going to talk about Oblique Seville next, but we've got 2 people with Kingston roots that I really think is going to push them far when they go to that first Kingston meet. And Kerley has a lot of Caribbean descent, so really there's going to be a lot of kind of a at-home, back to their roots vibe in that first Kingston meet. But for Hughes, he attends Kingston College in Jamaica. He actually trains with Bolt and wins gold in 2013 at CARIFTA, and then he goes to the Pan American Championships and medals. He reaches kind of a dilemma because his island actually doesn't compete in the Olympics, and so he ends up having to transfer his representation to Great Britain. He goes to the trials and is attempting to represent the country in the 2016 Olympics until he tears a ligament in his right knee. And this basically knocks him down throughout the rest of the 2016 season. And then he kind of has to come back through 2017. He doesn't really make his comeback until 2018. And even as he's coming back, he does well at a regional level, but he's not able to break through on a world level and reach some of the levels that some of the others in this group have been at. And so he does get to the Olympics in 2021, but he actually gets DQ'd at the finals because he false starts. And then he earns an Olympic silver medal in that Olympics in the 4x1, but later it comes out that his teammate was doping, so he gets stripped of that medal. And so then, as we move forward, he trains, keeps his head down, looks at the 2024 Olympics. He struggles in the 1, has to withdraw from the 200 meters, and he basically pulls it all together for the 4x1 and earns bronze as a part of that team, and he finally gets his Olympic medal. But the name of the game for Hughes has been adversity. I mean, he has excelled when he's had the opportunity to excel, and all of this kind of makes him a wild card because I think he's had a little bit of trouble to stay healthy when he actually makes it to his stage. I think that if he's able to come out and put together a solid year of training and use Grand Slam track as kind of his platform to compete with some of the best, he could be one of the athletes whose eyes are fully set on the World Championships. And as he experiences competing next to some of these other guys, he is ready to get to the end of the year, compete, and hopefully take a shot at a medal. What's hard is, man, the 100-meter dash is getting stacked. You have so many young athletes who are coming up, and it's going to get harder and harder and harder to medal. And so I think this could be one of those, like, this is my last shots. I'm going to put all my cards on the table, and I'm going to use Grand Slam track to see Kerley, see Bednarek, and I'm going to get to the end ready to go at the World Championships. And so, last but not least, we do have the young one of the group, and that is Oblique Seville. He's the only Jamaican who signed out of this group, and so quick accolades. He's an Olympic finalist from 2024, this most recent Olympics, which means all 4 of these runners were in that 100-meter dash final. And so half of the field is already signed up for Grand Slam track. But then 2023, he got 4th at the World Championships in the one, also did that in 2022. And he's got 1 medal from 2023 at the World Championships in the 4x100-meter dash. His PRs in Grand Slam events, he's got a 9.81 in the 100-meter dash, and then a 20.17 in the 200, which is significantly slower than the other 3. So that is definitely going to either have to be something that he's planning on focusing on a little more, or that's where he's going to have to forfeit a lot of points if he wants to actually be competitive in the Grand Slam track competition. But his background, grew up in Kingston, Jamaica, attended their all-male Calabar High School. He also has a link to Bolt. He trained under Glenn Mills, who was Bolt's mentor. Seville qualified for the 2019 Carifta Games, won the 100 and the 4x1. This propelled him to the U20 Jamaican Championships, which he won competition there, and then ended up getting a silver medal at the Pan American competition, which followed that. Unfortunately, he's so young that when 2020 comes around and the COVID pandemic kind of shuts everything down, he's just kind of stuck. He's not really able to get out and compete in any competitions. He just kind of keeps training. It's kind of what we saw get with Gebraiwet when we talked about the men's long distance, that shut the country down and they just weren't able to do really anything. They just had to use kind of what they had to keep training. But so he loses his 2020 season, comes to their Jamaican trials, nabs the last spot in the 100, kind of sneaks out and kind of gets it out of nowhere. And this back in 2021, he's not even 20 years old when this happens. And so he was definitely the young up-and-comer for the Jamaicans, who I think a lot of them have high hopes on moving forward. And so he continues to compete at a high level, reaches semifinals in 2022, and makes it even further, reaches semifinals in 2021 at the Tokyo Olympics, goes even further in the 100 in 2022. And he consistently then competes at a high level. He just doesn't have a lot of the accolades to show for it. But in what is probably the best race of his career, from a notoriety standpoint, is that he beat Noah Lyles head to head in June before the Olympics in the 100-meter dash. So when he goes into that Olympic finals, I think in the back of his head he is like, I think I can win this. And I think a lot of people had him pegged as one of the outsiders. But I think he went in with all the confidence in the world. Now, what happens is he goes, and if you watch that race, as he gets to the end, he kind of pulls up. And I don't know if he pulled something. I don't know if he just realized that he wasn't going to win and just decided to pack it in. regardless of what happened, I cannot imagine that he is satisfied with that. And I'm sure that that has played a part in wanting him to compete with Grand Slam track. Something, though, that is more notable for Oblique Seville is that he also is very motivated by time. And we talked about this a little bit last week with one of the female sprinters, but he cares a lot about the times he sets, and he wants to break records. And so he actually is tied for the Jamaican 60-meter indoor record. And I'd guess that that's something that he's got his eyes on breaking over the next few years, especially because he's so young and has so much potential. He also eyes probably the big records. The hard thing, though, is that he's Jamaican, and everything that he wants to do, if he wants any records, you're talking about competing with the greatest sprinter of all time, Usain Bolt. And so this could be one of those ways that he's trying to chase Bolt and make a name for himself. But since he was last in that heat and he's been fourth at Worlds multiple times, I think it's going to be beneficial for him to keep consistently competing with these athletes. Now, the big question for Seville is the 200 has not been his strong suit. Now, is that because he is so focused on the 100, or is that because he is just not naturally a 200-meter runner? I think I found that his 400 PR is like a 47, which would get crushed by all three of these other athletes. And so it doesn't seem like running for longer than the 100 is really in his skill suit. So I am really interested to see how he is able to compete as we get into the doubling, which he could be somebody who the doubling is much more negative for. So, who's missing? I'm just going to take a second right here to talk about Noah Lyles. I don't think he's coming. I don't think he's coming at all. And I think, if I'm honest, I don't think he wants this thing to succeed. I like Noah Lyles a lot. I actually think he's probably one of my favorite sprinters to watch. And I think he gets a bad image painted of him. And so that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying he's like the villain. Because I think that there's a lot of awesome things that Noah Lyles is doing to build up the sport of track and field. There's just something I feel like in these interactions with Grand Slam track that he keeps bringing up where it's like, I just don't want to be a part of it. And that doesn't mean that there's malicious intent. I just don't get the feeling that he is going to be at any of these meets. I would, if I was a betting person when it came to track and field, which maybe that's going to be a thing now that Grand Slam track's coming to the United States, but I just don't see, if Lyles does it, I can't see him doing more than one. I just think he has moved on to bigger and better things. And I think he's right a little bit. Like, he stands to lose. The next time he comes out on the track and does not win a 100-meter dash, he is going to be looked at like, oh, I thought we were the fastest man alive, because there's so many people that just want to see him fail. And so I don't need, I guess, to read the full list of Lyles' accolades. He's got so many of them, just very dominant in the 200 in the past, and then now he's branded himself as the fastest man in the world after he won the 100-meter dash. But I think that he is moved on. I think that this league, and I think rightfully so, I think this league right now is beneath him, and I think he knows it. And I think that a lot of this podcast stuff that he's been doing is, I think he hasn't came out and just said it, but I think a lot of the undertones, it's kind of like those guys aren't interested a ton in Grand Slam track. Like, I think a lot of them are looking towards doing other things with their time, and so that kind of sucks for Johnson, even though I do think that, like, just because it's not this year, they could be sitting back to see what happens in the future. So that's my spiel on Noah Lyles and Grand Slam track. I just don't think it's going to happen. A lot of people have linked him to the Kingston meet because I think his fiance might be from the Caribbean, and so a lot of them are saying that, like, that might be right up his alley. I just don't think it's going to happen. But other big names that aren't in this sprint group right now, and I would think that these two are a lot more likely to show up, like Shane Thompson, who is the 100-meter silver medalist, who, was right in a photo finish with Lyles, from Jamaica, 23 years old. He's becoming a bigger name almost, it seems like, every week in track and field. And he's on the opposite hand. I'd be kind of surprised, I think, if he didn't end up going out to the Kingston meet and putting on a show for everybody. I think that is very likely, just because track is such a big part of Jamaican culture, and he is one of the leading figures in that sport. I just don't see them holding a Jamaican event and him not showing up. Like, I feel like that's where Johnson would spend the money, like at that Kingston meet, you gotta get Thompson there. You don't need Lyles, you need Thompson, just because that'll help just elevate the sport of Grand Slam track in the Caribbean. But the other big name that I think that we are going to be seeing I think especially the Kingston meet is Let's Tebogo, the 21-year-old from Botswana. I think for him, Grand Slam track is just a huge stage that it'd be hard to turn down. And he's got gold medal in the 200, and he's got world championship medals, and he's been to the Olympics, and he's kind of done it all, if we're honest, and he's only a young age. But when you're 21 years old, why not just go to a meet, have some fun, and win $100,000 for coming in first place? Like, I really think that Tebogo is somebody who, at a young age, just go have fun, compete against some of the best in the world. You've still got your whole entire career to prove whatever you need to prove. And so I don't think you need to shy away from talent. And if somebody beats you, you've got your whole career to recover from it. So I'd love to see Tebogo come out. And I think that any of those three would make this go to a whole another level of competition. Because right now, I kind of see, with the Grand Slam track roster, just getting into my final rankings with these four signed athletes. I think it's Bednarek, and I think it's Kerley, and I think that they're kind of duking it out for the top spot. And then I kind of think it's Seville in that third slot, and Hughes. I just think that Hughes can't match the other three in the 100. And so, and you know what, I'm going to even backtrack. I said that these four were in the final. I don't think Hughes was in the final. I don't know if he's got the top end speed. I know the time's there. I just don't know if he's going to stay healthy enough to compete. His PRs are there. He just hasn't put it together on the big stage for me to think that he is going to be able to compete with these other three. And maybe that's what it is, because maybe Grand Slam track is not the big stage, so he'll come out and surprise all of us. But I do think this is the Kerley and Bednarek show until we see otherwise. So, went a little long today. I think we're creeping up on 45 minutes, but if you've listened this long, I guess I want to say thank you very much. I always appreciate everybody who spends a little time with me on Monday nights talking about track and field. And so if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, and now Apple Podcast. And I'll keep working to get this in other areas. So have a great night. This is Justin Ayers with the Bell Lap Podcast. I will talk to you next week.